Hello and welcome to Pitch Purpose, the podcast for marketing leaders in impact-driven organisations. We know that behind every business is a brilliant marketing function working to balance profit and purpose. I'm here with the fabulous Ian Scott, founder of digital agency Exceptional.
And I'm joined by Emma Healy, who is MD and founder of PR and content agency Thinking Hat Media. We are marketing and PR professionals on a mission to amplify disruptive thinkers and innovative leaders.
We're asking some of the country's most experienced business minds at marketing moments that have driven impact to their organisations.
Marketing insights, we're going to be looking at the purpose behind some of the campaigns, spend, ROI, but also learning how they've balanced purpose and profitability.
So welcome to Pitch Purpose. Today's special guest is Jeff Dewin. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be talking a lot about how we challenge the norms, challenging traditional systems. Jeff, I know you've got a lot of experience on that, and also your book, Doing the Opposite, which we'll talk about later on. Bit of background though. So you're an East End lad done good, I think. About, what's this, 13, 14 years ago? Shall we start there?
Yes. East End lad done good. So definitely East End is correct. Used to be a lad, not anymore, an old man. But I guess it was, the journey I went on was very, very ambitious. I was naturally ambitious. Didn't know why, didn't know what drove it. But I just always wanted to get to the top of whatever it was I was doing. And in my case, I was a fridge engineer and I wanted to be the best fridge engineer. And I just set goals. And the one thing I learned, and I didn't know this until I'd written the book, but when you say stuff out loud, especially in front of people, then you create accountability. Now, I didn't know that when I was 19 years old, but and what happened was I said out loud to a load of guys that I was working with that had been there 30 odd years in that particular business. And I said, I'm going to be a supervisor by the time I'm 19. And they laughed at me and threw bacon rolls at me and said, shut up, you silly little boy, and all this sort of stuff. And I was relentless. I just kept going. And then at 19 years old, and this is the short version, but at 19 years old, we was in a meeting and our service manager that was looking after all of us guys said, we've got a promotion to announce in the pub. And we're going, really? We didn't know anything about this. And then suddenly he threw a set of car keys at me. Because when you were a supervisor, you got an estate car instead of a van. And of course, no one was more shocked than me, but that created a new set of problems. So although I was over the moon that I'd achieved my goals, I got ostracised by all the other guys that had been there 20, 30 years and never made supervisor.
Right.
So I had a new set of challenges I had to overcome that I obviously knew nothing about. So that was the East End lad that's going in that environment. And then, of course, the journey continued through later on in my career.
Tell us a bit more about how Cloud FM started then.
Well, I launched a business when I was 26 years old, which was installing refrigeration air conditioning, which was my specialist subject. And I grew that business from 0 to 5 or 6 million quid, and I couldn't get it beyond 5 or 6 million. So I started employing people that were much, much better than me, realising that if I want someone to be better or do more than me, I've got to get someone that's more experienced, I've got to pay them more money, etc., etc. So I went down that road and I brought in some corporates that were, in some cases, were our clients. One was in fact NatWest Bank, and I brought in the head of property for NatWest Bank, paid him a stupid salary, and I realised that there was, and when you're an entrepreneur, when you build a business and when it's successful, you become a lawyer, you become head of HR, you become head of IT, you become an accountant. So you have to learn all this stuff. And if you're successful, you're in this false sense of security that you know what you're doing. To cut a long story short, I got bored of the business. Through immaturity, I just buried my head and went and found something more exciting. So I bought a football club and I left the business to be run by some of my trusted colleagues that were very excited about the opportunity of running the business. I took my eye off the ball, and then within 4 or 5 years, the business had run out of cash. They waved the white flag, the team that were running it, and said, "Can you come in?" I went in, and I went into the business to see it was in a bit of trouble. And they said, "Really sorry, Jeff, we should have waved the flag earlier, but we thought we could trade out of it." yeah, we think we're in a bit of trouble. And I said, no, you are, we are. And I apologised. I said, you can't apologise. This is my responsibility. And essentially the business went into bankruptcy. I went into bankruptcy and ended up going to the lowest point of my life. And because I was involved in this football club, it was a very high profile club in the town, which meant everybody knew me just because of all the PR and the marketing and God knows what. And I had to walk down the high street with people saying to me, morning, Jeff. All right, Jeff, where are you going, Jeff? And I'm going job seekers. And so that was tough. And then I just went hiding for a while because I just couldn't face the world. And it was...
Bit of soul searching.
Oh, it was. And if I'd suffered depression, that's what it was. Luckily I didn't. But yeah, you feel like you've let everybody down. I had 3 kids at the time and a wife, and you think, oh, I'll just let everybody down. And it felt terrible, but it was a pain that had to be experienced. And it's a bit cliche, but no pain, no gain. You've got to go through. You can't read about this and avoid it because you read about it. You've got to experience this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then after about 9 months of wondering what on earth I was going to do, I just looked in the mirror one day and said, you've got to sort this out. This is your problem. You're doing. What are you going to do? And I just realised and said one thing that meant a lot, which was, you've got a lot of learning to do. You knew very little. In fact, you knew nothing. And your success plastered over the cracks that really existed. So I didn't go back to read a book or get some tutoring. I went back to work for 8 years. And I went from small owner managed, large owner managed and corporate to try and understand why I couldn't get it beyond the 5 or 6 million, why I'd failed, where did I get it wrong. And during that journey, not only did I learn those lessons, but what I also learned was something new, and that was in the facilities industry. 1 in 7 adults works in facilities management. People don't realise the size of this this economy, and it's a £200 billion industry in the UK alone.
Huge.
So, and I found there were hundreds of thousands of incredibly good people behaving badly. And that wasn't because they were bad people, it's because the environment in which they operated meant that they had to behave that way to survive. They were lying about contracts, they were lying about performance to their clients, because if they didn't, they'd lose the contract, that meant they'd lose their job, and all the behavioural stuff was all wrong. That's when I learned, and of course, during that process, I'm trying to improve an industry, so I started being very disruptive, which meant I couldn't hold a job down for more than 2 years because everyone wanted to get rid of me. And then I realised I couldn't turn the oil tanker. There was no way I was going to turn the oil tanker. So I said, the only way to do this is embryonically. So when I started my first business, which was an air conditioning business, I started that to make money. I started that to get rich. When I started Cloud to solve a problem. And that was the difference between the two businesses. And then Cloud launched in 2011, 2012, and yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the successes that Cloud has had. Take us through some of the contracts that you've won and how you've got from, tell me what's the value of the company today?
The value today is about 50 million, but the value by the end of 2027, 28 will be about anything between 200 and 500 million.
Yeah, wow.
So that's the journey we're on.
How did you get there?
When we launched Cloud, we launched a model that wasn't designed to be a race to the bottom. It wasn't designed to be cheaper or better. It was designed to change behaviour. It was designed to create a safe environment where people could be honest about everything that was going on. And you might not like the data you see, but you know it's true. So, but that was quite courageous, because you've got to bear in mind, it wasn't just about the people providing these services. It was about the market. The clients were behaving in a way to drive this behaviour as well. So we had to re-educate clients as well. So we went on this journey, and for the first couple of years where we were sort of promoting our model, which was completely the opposite to anybody else in our industry, we had to pound the pavements, because most people were saying, that will never work, that will never catch on, that will never take off. This is outside of all of our thinking. Why don't you just do the same as everybody else? And we obviously didn't. We stayed resilient. So we pounded the pavements, and after about the first 6 months of launching the business, we won our first client, which was a £1 million a year client. And for those that remember, it was a company called Republic Clothing. There was a clothing store. I had about 120 stores.
Yeah.
And the reason we won Republic was because the guy running at the time, or the FM guy at the time, was new in post and he wanted to make a name for himself. So he decided to try something new. So he was an early adopter, which is our target market. Anyway, we went on with that. That was great. Unfortunately, a year later, while we was then trying to win new clients, they went bust. And they hit us for about £400,000. And we're going, oh my God, that's it. We're done already. Like this is a short journey. And at that point, we was negotiating and we secured Pret-a-Manger for all of their sandwich shops. And we'd secured that for about £1.5 million. And because we knew what we were going through, we pulled one last-ditch attempt to say, would you pay us in advance for some value benefit back to you? And they said yes. So by the skin of our teeth and with 3 or 4 days to spare, we managed to protect ourselves from that 300 grand loss. And we were now on the journey with Pret-a-Manger. And then we're still pounding the pavements, but Pret-a-Manger was a challenging client for us, a very challenging client. The business itself was a great business, but the people we were working with were ruthless, and they applied a win-lose principle, whereas we are into a win-win-win principle. So we realised that we don't have a long life with Pret. And then we started pushing hard, and then the next client we won, which was after about 3 years, was Gondola Group. Now, Gondola Group was a group of companies that consisted of Pizza Express, Ask and Zizi and Byron Burgers. And that was a huge account. That was a £10 million account for a year, over 5 years. So it was a £50 million win.
Yeah, okay.
And we were amazed because at that point we was only a £1.5 million business. How did we win a £10 million account?
Yes.
But again, because of the way we went about it, which was different to everybody else, we gave them certainty, we gave them baselining, they knew exactly how to measure our performance, good, bad or ugly. And more importantly, if we failed to perform, we would return whatever the promise was that we didn't deliver. So it was about creating a zero risk environment.
And that's compelling.
It is compelling, and some people say, "Well, that's just stupid," because if it goes wrong, you're done again. And but we knew it couldn't go wrong because our data was so strong and so rich. That's what we believed in.
Jeff, can I ask? Obviously, were there any other reputational issues to overcome from going bankrupt and then trying to win business with these big companies? Were they ever sceptical about you and your background? Did they worry that, cloud wasn't a safe bet?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, because they didn't know.
Fantastic.
This information is only something that I've come forward when I wrote the book on a warts and all process, by which time our reputation's already solidified.
Yeah.
But during that journey, I certainly wasn't ringing from the rooftops and putting in the paper that I'd gone into bankruptcy. So
No.
that was just something in the background which most people, in fact, almost no one knew about. And we then went on this journey with Gondola Group, and then the next thing, we then started talking to other brands such as TUI Travel. We started speaking to KFC. We tried to win KFC in 2014, and they said, or 13, and they said, look, we'd love to give you the work. We love what you're doing, but you're only £1 million business. We're too big for you, and we'll swallow you up. So we said, okay, disappointed, but accepted it. But then, of course, once we've won Gondola, and you know the phrase, people attract people, right?
Yes.
So once we won Gondola and it hit the press, and we was very good at our PR machine on letting the world know what we'd done and how we're doing it, and promoting, obviously, Gondola Group, which they loved as well, suddenly we're now a bigger business.
Let's pick up on that a little bit because, when we spoke before recording, there's a lot of contracts, high value contracts that you've won, and you've mentioned a couple already. But the crux of it seems to be around letting prospective clients know that you've won big contracts with these other guys, right? Yep. So let's dig deep in a bit more about that. How did you go about educating those prospects that actually you are big enough now to work with them? I assume some huge marketing campaign, lots of money, banners on buses, that sort of thing?
We did absolutely none of that. So we were very much of the mind that if you want to build a business, you can throw money until the cows come home. It's about people buy from people. And it was about reputation. It was about relationship. It was about connection. It was about belief. It was about trust. And the only way to do that is you have to meet these people. And where some companies and people go wrong is they'll go to a networking event with an expectation they're going to walk away with 3 or 4 orders.
Yes.
And that's not why you go to networking. You go to networking to build relationships that may or may not in the future turn into something positive bi-directionally. And And if your motive is just to build relationship and to seek to understand, then you're on a great journey. But it's a long game. It's not short-termism. That's where people get it wrong. And when people try to look at what's the ROI for putting a 4-page advert in the Sun newspaper, well, you'll never know. And if you say to the Sun newspaper, do you guarantee I'm going to get at least 4 times more money than you've charged me for profit? And they go, well, I can't promise you anything. Well, of course they can't. So this is about the long game, and that's about reputation. It's about brand equity. And these are all buzzwords that we didn't know back in the early days. What we did know is this is about building relationship, creating noise, getting people interested in what you're doing and why you're doing it, and getting them to understand your purpose. And during that networking, as we were trying to grow, we did a number of events where we were just talking about thought leadership. Why are we doing the same thing and expecting a different result? And we would talk about the different ways of thinking, of crafting an outcome that gave more certainty, because the one thing a human can't stand is uncertainty. So how do we create certainty? And during some of those networking events where we were talking, we attracted 6 incredible people that had held jobs as head of HR and FM in Deutsche Bank globally. We attracted people that was responsible for every bit of major tech purchased by the NHS. And these people approached us and said, we want to come on your journey. And I said, I'd love you to, but we've got no money. We're a small business. And they said, we don't care. We want to be part of this journey. So I'd assembled a board that was £1 million of a board that was costing me no money. I wasn't even paying their train fare to come to board meetings because they were on that journey. And it proved that if you're trying to solve a problem and you've got a purpose, you attract incredible people.
Right. So you surrounded yourself with those people. You mentioned now having the board. I imagine for some of our listeners who are spending a lot of time networking, going to events, I think the phrase is kissing a lot of frogs, and perhaps still not got the kind of attributable return from doing it. If I was starting out, what kind of advice would you give to say, well, this is how you find the right networks, and when you were in it, this is what you need to do? Because I'm sure working the room is one way, but it sounds like you're also on a stage at some point. Have I understood that right?
Yes, correct. So what you want to do is you want to be noticed, right? You don't want to be noticed for the sake of being noticed, but you want to understand if what you've got to say is of any interest to people, and then that helps you get traction. And if you're losing the room, there's 2 reasons. One is the person doing the talking has just not got the capability, or 2 is the story's not strong enough, and you've got to work that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting selected by my team to say, Jeff, you need to do the talking. Your passion comes through like you wouldn't believe, and therefore people believe in what you believe. So I was the one that got selected to do the talking. Now, had I have not been successful, I'd have stepped back and another person would. And it's about having the humility to realise that you've got to play people in position. And you've got to get the right people, and you've got to have diverse people. One of the guys on my board who's been with me from day dot, Christopher Gallup. I mean, he, to all of us, he's John Steed. He's the bowler hat, pinstripe suit man. No one would put me and him together. Yet we work like you wouldn't believe because we're diverse.
Yeah.
And we're interested in each other's perspectives. We're not trying to teach each other what we've got right and what we've got wrong. You just accept that it's a diverse viewpoint. So part of the journey, yes, it's surrounded, but when you talk about kissing frogs, it's not about going to a network and then kissing a load of frogs in the network. It's about the network itself is the frog. Is this the right environment? Is it talking about the right things, right? Yeah. Is it, have I got a guy come up to me and saying, do you need any CCTV? Wrong network, right? So you need to go to a network where people are saying, I'm really interested in the challenges you face because I want to learn from it. And these are some of the things I've had. What have you done? That is networking. That's relationship building. And of course, the ultimate network that really turned my life was a peer group, which was called Vistage, which is an international peer group where you've got groups all over the world, which consist of 12, 14, 15 CEOs of different businesses, where you actually help each other. And before you know where you are, you're paying a small fee for this peer group, but what you've got is you've got a couple of million quid's worth of non-exec directors free of charge, and you truly try and help each other, and that is the ultimate network, and that was the network that changed my life on the journey from sort of 15, 16 up until now.
So Jeff, the procurement process is a bit of a slog. Meetings, pitches, admin, all the bureaucracy. I mean, you must have done hundreds in your time.
I did in my early days working for other companies, and that's when I learned that I don't ever want to come across procurement ever again.
I think that feeling's mutual.
Yeah.
But that's not an attack on the people or the principle. The principle is, how do we get the best bang for our buck? And I think that's okay, but procurement just asked the wrong question. So you can procure a table, you can procure a TV, you can procure a fridge. You cannot procure a service. There are too many hidden moving parts that catch out procurement. And what I've seen over all of my career is procurement declaring victory in a race to the bottom for the client of which they're working. They get patted on the back, they might get their bonuses, and they run off into the sunset, and a year later the client has spent more money than before procurement got involved. And I think this is the bit that procurement is input based. What is your cost? What is your rate? What are the things you're going to charge me for, and how many times you're going to charge me? They don't look at the outcomes.
Yeah.
They don't hold anybody accountable for the outcome.
Yeah.
So we're back to what I said a little while ago with the Sun newspaper, bless it. I spend $5,000 on a 4-page ad. Where is your accountability for the success of that ad? Well, there is none.
No.
So all they care about is getting you $5,000. They don't care about the outcome. So that's a win-lose situation. We win, and you may or may not win.
Yeah.
So, and I think when you've got companies that are attacking a market to solve a problem, not to build, not to find a niche, but to solve a problem, and you make yourself accountable for the outcome, you immediately start to build confidence and trust. And the key is you've got to make sure you are accountable, and there's nowhere to hide. And of course, what you do is you focus on actually trying to solve the client's problem, not looking at your P&L every day.
Imagine if you're surrounding yourself with these people who are on the buying side, actually having their influence internally. Has that helped you kind of sidestep procurement process in any way?
We have sidestepped procurement in 90% of our trading. And all of that trading began with procurement. So what we have to do is get early adopters. Now, if you've got a procurement process that has been declared as very successful in your organisation, then you take Poundland, for instance. They had a very aggressive procurement team, which is why they were successful. They did things like got the Mars bar made slightly smaller so they could charge less. And the consumer didn't really notice and stuff like that. So, in that environment, procurement are great for growing an organisation. But then, of course, they try to apply it everywhere. And then they try to buy a service, they get it horribly wrong, and they go through so many pains as a result of doing that. And the sad thing is, as we all know, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Sure.
And procurement, typically, environmentally, always does exactly the same thing. And they expect a different result. So until procurement starts focusing all of their attention on outcomes, and they make themselves accountable for the success of what they have declared as success, procurement will never change.
Yeah, I think I'm sure Emma and I have been through similar experiences with procurement, which seems counter to getting the best result. And it's good to hear your story about that. I want to come back to just very quickly something you mentioned earlier about being in the room and about personalities and you being kind of pushed in to take that center stage. What would you say if personality is a big part of that? What if you say someone in an organisation doesn't have that either confidence or personality to shine on stage, but still wants to have the successes that you have?
They need to find someone that shines on stage. It's really
Simple as that.
really simple. It's really simple. You have someone that the people that are most successful on stage are the ones that are genuinely seen as authentic, and you can only be authentic if you know your product, right? If you are absolutely know and believe your product, then you will come across authentic. You've then got to have the ability to get people to have tingles down their spine as they're listening to what you're saying. And it's about not over-promising. It's about just having those real honest statements. I mean, the bit I love, when I realised that I was up for this, after being told I've got to go and speak, I started to create pauses in large audience, and especially procurement. And I'd stand on stage and I'd say, I've been in my career for over 40 years. And in that 40 years, every client I've met, from a small client to a corporate, not one of them has wanted to reduce costs. Then I go slightly. and
Mic
the
drop.
auditorium goes silent.
Yeah.
But that silence is powerful, isn't it?
It is, as long as you've got something to justify it at the
Yeah.
end, right? So I then allow them to sit and think, this guy's stupid. And then I say, but every client I've met has wanted to control costs. Because if you control it, you can put them up, you can keep them the same, or you can put them down. The wrong question is, how do we lower our costs? The right question is, how do we control our costs so we can decide which way to go? And that was the methodology. And of course, that gets attention because it sounds absolutely like common sense. But because of the myriad of the stuff that goes on in facilities, there's so many moving parts. Everyone has already accepted they'll never control costs, so therefore it's just a race to the bottom. Whereas if you focused on controlling the cost and you've got the tech and the ability to do that, why would you not focus on controlling the costs?
Okay. Finally, just on this kind of segment here around what I think we're hearing, word of mouth being a huge part of how you're in business, how the success of Cloud FM has come about, but also you as the rock star behind it and taking center stage. If you were to quantify that, either in time or perhaps in money spent, investments made, what would you say?
I would say the same thing I say most of the time. Are you asking the right question? So when someone says to me, in our business, we've got to grow the business. How are we going to grow the business? The first thing one defaults to is marketing. You said it earlier, banners on buses, full page ads in the Sun, etc., etc. And I'm saying, but the problem with that is you've got to go for the long game with that. You've got to have posters on buses for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And you may or may not succeed in that, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And then you're going to have this bitter taste in your mouth thinking, I've just spent all that money and I can't even see a return. So therefore, I just said what I believe passionately was, you have to invest your time in brand equity. You have to invest your time in being the outlier, being seen as the outlier, being seen as a thought leader, where even if people were not going to buy from you, they were curious enough about what you were doing and why you were doing it. And the only thing we did of any material investment was we took on the main sponsorship of Essex Cricket under the ground naming rights, and we became the Cloud County Ground. And that was a 10-year sponsorship. And most people said, why are you doing that? How are you going to measure it? And I said, the purpose of this is not for me to achieve a legitimate and focused return on investment. It was about brand awareness, because under that sponsorship, we went global.
Yeah.
And more importantly, is we were this minnow in this huge 200 billion industry, but suddenly everybody in the industry knew about our business. They knew of our business. And I just decided that the best investment is brand equity, brand awareness, and your brand. And a trusted brand, a brand that always does what it says it's going to do, and a brand that is winning global household names. How are they doing that?
How much did it cost you?
Well, if you exclude my time, because I'm obviously paid a salary, which is unfortunately deemed as an overhead, which is a bit of a challenge. But I mean, Essex Cricket, for instance, was they're first class cricket, right? They're providing players to England. So this is first class. This is equivalent to the football Premiership.
Yeah.
And we started our journey off at £75,000 a year. And we then went on to do some other stuff, which ended up costing me £150,000 a year for the remaining years. If I did that in Premiership football, that would have been 100 million. Yet I had great exposure to the extent I needed it. And any other events has just been thought leadership, where I'd have paid to hire a conference suite or something where I've got 50, 60 influential people come in, and we would do thought leadership and talk about the problems. I wouldn't be sitting there going, you should buy from us. This was all about, Jesus, these guys are credible. That was what it was about. And I would say I've probably spent £1 million over 10 years in that process.
There's one more question I'd like to ask, and I wondered if you can summarise for us how Cloud FM has worked to balance profit, planet and purpose.
I guess the first thing is, whatever purpose a business has, it needs to understand it. It needs to be able to disseminate it through its organisation, so therefore it needs to be simple. In our world, I'm just going to give you an example, our purpose is to restore trust in a failing industry by changing the rules. Everybody in our business knows that. And when you can create that clarity, then that's where you go. And businesses need to focus on one thing. How do I build a community? Doesn't matter what product you sell, what service you sell, how do I build a community where everybody believes what you believe? That becomes the foundation of any business.
What hasn't worked so well for you? What did you have high hopes for and it's failed miserably? Anything that cost you lots of money or reputation from a marketing perspective?
Yes, like anything, my whole ethos is try new things. My whole ethos is don't do the same thing and expect a different result. So we went on a journey of saying, right, how do we grow to that next level? At that point, we're at 70 odd million quid. And how do we get to the 100 million, the 200 million? So I brought in some big hitters into the business that I'd known for years anyway, and was never in a position to be able to afford to bring them on. But eventually we got to the stage where we could attract them, which we did. And I said, what do we do differently? And their experience was ABM, account-based marketing. And they said, we want to build this whole structure about account-based marketing. And this is how it works. So I got to understand it because I didn't understand it. And so they explained to me what it was about, very targeted audiences with lots of intel, saying the right message, et cetera, so on and so on. So I let the business run with that. And it was very professional. And the only thing that I said was, when we do this, which I don't mind trying new things, what we must not do is risk the brand reputation in its current form.
Yeah.
So I don't want spam emails going out and stuff like that, which it was never about that anyway. It was very, very focused into businesses and or sectors. And I probably spent about 350, 400,000 pounds on one campaign.
Wow.
Which came to nothing.
So tell us a bit more about the campaign itself. What was the strategy? What was the actual plan?
So the strategy was, what is the message we're sending? What are the problems we're solving? Firstly, if we're targeting a sector, let's say supermarkets, for example, what is it that supermarkets want or need? What is their burning desire, a problem they want to solve that they currently haven't solved? So that's a lot of intel, that's a lot of research, that's a lot of stuff, that's a lot of talking to people. And then once you've established that you think that's what you're after, you then have to say to yourself, right, well, what's the intel? Who are the people that are the influencers? Who are the people that are decision makers? Who are the people we're going to get to that would actually be interested in this stuff? That's even more research. And then once you've established that, you've then got to come up with a campaign, whether it be animations, visuals. What is it that's going to give them their attention? How are we going to give them the hook that says, I want to speak to you, I want to speak to you? And how do you do that in a way that they don't think, Jesus, I'm going to have to listen to another load of salesmen to sell me something I don't want? So there was an awful lot of time and effort that went into that intel and building the personas that you need to attract and you need to attack. And so it was a lot of work, a lot of great experience. Information that you could achieve was fantastic when you laser focused on it. We had high hopes. We went on the campaigns. We did it in very structured ways for very structured periods of time. We had an agency that was producing the animations and the videos and the hooks and the powerful music. And it drew a blank on a direct return. But again, what it did do is it impacted and grew the brand reputation. We were getting known a bit more. So as much as I had hopes that something material would happen, what we learned was that things are not as easy as you'd hope they'd be. But more importantly, what value did I actually achieve? And what I knew was that we were still building our brand equity, our brand. We were still building that brand of trust, of doing things differently, of being an innovator. And of course, that's how we continually attract the market. And going back to the stuff you mentioned about the marketing and Essex Cricket, the one thing that happened during our entire journey from 2014 up until today is the clients that we serve and our new clients all approach us. We don't have salesmen ringing people up saying, can we come and talk to you about FM?
Yeah.
Everybody bar no one comes to us. And that is where you see the value of the reputation of the brand.
I think so. I mean, I call that performance branding, perhaps, which is, an analogy I use is, when you go into a convenience store, you've got a range of different things, soft drinks you can select. You don't expect or need the shopkeeper to pitch to you whether you're going to drink Coca-Cola or Sprite or Fanta, because the decision is already made when they've walked through the door. Yeah. And I think that's the holy grail for almost every business, right?
Well, that's the brand, isn't it? Because you're buying a brand. You're buying what you know. And listen, this all comes down to doing the opposite and people doing the same thing. If you go into a restaurant and you've got 50 items on an Indian restaurant or a Chinese restaurant, most of us, nearly all of us, will say, I'll have chicken chow mein, I'll have sweet and sour chicken balls, please. And you'll order what you know. Very few people say bring me something I've never ordered.
Yeah.
Because they're fearful they might not enjoy
Totally.
it.
Absolutely.
Jeff, is obviously you've been front and centre of cloud. You're the heartbeat of the business. Could it still be successful without you?
I'd like to think so, because I'm in the lucky position now of having an incredible management team that do all the things that I can't do. And this is where it gets a bit humbling. My team have said to me numerous times, but particularly hit home hard about 2 or 3 years ago when they said to me, Jeff, you're the CEO. I went, yeah, I know that. They said, but you're also the CIO, because I originally built all the technology. I said, well, I'm not, am I? I'm not, so I can't do both jobs, because they said, no, you're not getting it. The CEO, you're the Chief Energy Officer. And CIO, you're the Chief Inspiration Officer. So I'm wheeled out to tell the story which I know and I believe and I'm passionate about, as is everybody that works with and for me. And then they wheel me back into the cupboard again when they don't need me anymore, which enables me to play golf 2 or 3 times
I was
a
going to
week.
say, what's inside the cupboard? It sounds like a golf course.
And because I'm passionate, because I did build a technology, I know everything about the business, which is great. But if I stepped away, and bear in mind, I'm lucky enough to now have a 3-week, 4-week, 5-week holiday. I have no fear that the business is not going to be here when I come back. So the answer is yes, the business can manage without me, but they do love that added benefit where they can wheel somebody out that's going to get people pumped as and when they need it, and that's my job.
Well, your other job is, as an international energizer. You're a global keynote speaker, so you're touring the globe, making people, businesses, employees feel good, and trying to change the culture, the mindset, which is, the theme of today's show, and that's really important. It must make you feel good.
Listen, I pinch myself every day. I mean, I'm loving life, and the golden rule of life for me has always been, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I love every minute of everything I do. And I'm not traveling all over the world talking about facilities. I'm talking about people's lives, real life. How do you get people to reach fulfillment? And it's never about money. So that's the bit I love doing most of all.
Before we go, Jeff, what would be your biggest advice to anyone starting a business today?
Why? You've got to answer
why.
that question. You've got to ask yourself, why am I starting this business? If you're starting it for the reason that you're unemployable or you're starting it to get rich, then there's a 90% chance you'll fail. If you're starting it to solve somebody else's problem, then there's a 90% chance you'll succeed.
Jeff, for someone starting a business, what kind of marketing advice would you give them?
Network. Because you can throw a lot of money at doing what everybody else does with little or no return, or certainly no return for a long period of time. And it's the fastest way to burn money. So network. And then you'll find your way about whether certain different parts of marketing are going to work for you. But it's all about relationships.
And how can people find out more about you? You've got a book as well, doing the opposite.
Yeah, I wrote a book that was just my story. It wasn't a how-to in any way, shape or form. But I wrote the book in 2020. I published it in 2021, March. And surprisingly, because it wasn't the reason, I did it for legacy and to share knowledge. But in December 2021, it hit #1 on Amazon globally, which knocked me for 6.
Wow, fantastic.
But now what I do is I tell my story more personally. So I've got a website, jeffdewing.co.uk, where you can hear all about me, my keynotes, the book. And the business cloud, which is obviously the one thing that I still love every day, is cloudfmgroup.com, where you can see what we do in the world of facilities management.
Perfect, thank you. In every episode of Pitch Purpose, we like to also focus on one campaign in the wild. Today, I want to bring to everyone's attention this company called Notpla. Now, they are making packaging using seaweed. And some of the packaging is what you would normally see in takeaway shops, but equally, some of it is also edible. I think they sponsored, I can't remember which one, but a London Marathon where they filled them with Lucozade, and runners were just able to pop them in their mouth. They dissolved, all biologically friendly. So great innovation.
Yes.
Definitely worth a shout out. What do we think of the name though, Notpla?
It's not good. Well, actually, now I know how you pronounce it. I think it's cool, But I mean, I think when I first saw the brand name written down, I thought it was not PLA or Notpla. No.
Yeah, the association with plastics.
Yes.
Is that right? I don't know what PLA.
Well, it could be plastic, plant, could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I suppose like not plastics, perhaps, is what they're focusing on.
It's confusing.
It's a little bit confusing.
It's not. It certainly doesn't catch the eye, but it's one of those things that if they market it like the Mars company, then everyone will know Notpla. So it all comes down to the amount of money they're going to put into getting people to say. But I just listened to you say Notpla, whereas most people go Notpla.
Yeah, Notpla.
So I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if we need to focus too much on the name, other than to suggest that they could have done better. But the product itself and innovation. And listen, we're in a we've gone through millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Ys. People now care about this stuff, and I think that's the bit that's really interesting. But it is about, does it solve a problem? The bit I loved when you mentioned about these tiny little capsules that are full of Lucozade or water or whatever product they choose to put in it that's good for you. To have somebody running a London marathon that hasn't got time to stop and grab a bottle and stuff like that, to be able to pop that in and it gives them the nutrients, I mean, that's solving a problem, isn't it?
It is solving a problem. So controversially, from a marketing perspective, I think the name is important because I think that's what people are going to talk about and remember, and is going to sort of, it almost hinges a lot of their comms is around it. Take this, for example. I think that capsule, they've called it Ooho?
Yes.
Again, which from my notes here is because that's the noise people were making when they had it for the first time, was like oohoo or something. I don't think that works. And the innovation is important, and our job, certainly as marketers, is to make sure people know about it. Is this blocking them from becoming known?
I think the name, in a way, undermines how good the product is, because actually that's the bit that we're talking about, and since it was put on our radar, that's the thing that we've discussed the most, beyond actually the innovation and what it does. I love the product, and it reminds me of a washing tablet, what you just chuck in the drum. But
is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Not if you eat it.
Not really. It's
not going to taste good.
Exactly, and there'd been bad press years ago when people were eating those things, right? So there's some association around it, and I think they want to be careful around that. And again, we want it to be successful, as you said, Jeff. It's a great product. It's solving a great problem.
Yeah, I think what's the stat? Is it 8 million tons of plastic ends up in our oceans every year? And I think what the brand is saying is that they can help make plastic disappear, which is a pretty bold statement.
You have to commend it, because that is exactly what we all need. We need this focus. We need this attention. You've got microplastics now coming out of washing machines and washing powders and clothing when you're washing them, which is all ending up somewhere in the sea. Yeah. So we've got to address this stuff, and anyone that's trying to do something about it can only be commended. But I think it comes down to, if you're going to build a brand, there has to be a relationship with the brand and understanding. And I'm speaking now without the knowledge and the time and effort they may have spent in building that name. But there's another thing out called Eurogum, which is going everywhere, and it's neuroscience have developed this gum that all the Stephen Bartlett's, everybody's now talking about it, that focuses your mind after chewing some gum, which is entirely healthy, it's entirely plant based, but it stimulates your neuro. Now suddenly, if I see Neurogum, I know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But I haven't got to think, what does Notpla mean? So although they can build a great brand, it's about how you execute that brand. And I think, when we had Cloud sponsoring the county ground, it was Cloud County Ground. It sort of rolled. The new sponsors, because we ended our sponsorship last year, the new sponsors, the Ambassador Cruise Liner Ship Ground.
Wow, that's easy. Just rolls off the tongue. That one.
Whereas if they just said the Ambassador Ground, it just hits harder.
Sounds classy as well.
It does, and these are the things where some companies get it wrong. What's the most favourite one of my life? The meerkat. Compare the market, right? And the meerkat.
Yeah.
What genius was that? Because they started talking about something else and created that link back, and that's all people see. That was marketing genius. And I think they're the sort of things that people need to spend their time and effort on how do we capture the hearts and the minds of the very people that we're trying to sell our products to.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the meerkat one. I mean, I remember that one from the early 2000s, actually. It was Compare the Meerkat instead of
Yeah.
Compare the Market. And they set up a separate website to not fool people, but it was satirical. You mentioned also about sponsorship and partnerships. Notpla do quite well in that front, I think. They're collaborating with, my notes here, Just Eat, obviously on the packaging side of it, and the takeaway.com. Levi as well. We've also heard about the LucasAid pods, and within London Marathon. We probably call that experiential marketing, perhaps. People experiencing it. They've also got shots. They've recorded people, putting one into the mouth and whatever the word that they were coming out with. I think experiential marketing is a good one. I think it's about getting people to feel something and to connect that positive emotion with your brand.
But I think you said something really, really, really important. We all love to use this buzzword in business, but very few of us actually do it, and that's the word collaboration. When you can truly, rather than saying I want to sell my products to you, how do we collaborate? How do we learn from each other? How do we grow together? And I don't know if you're aware of this, but at the moment there's a few companies now that are hitting the market with tinned water.
Yes, I see a lot of that.
And
Cano water or...
Exactly, and there's all different types. But what's interesting, firstly, how do you sell tinned water to somebody? That's question one. But they are trying to get away from the plastics, which I get. But what they're now doing, some of these brands, they're saying, actually, to each one of the tinned water manufacturers, they're saying, why don't we send each other our products and talk to each other about the products?
Okay.
How do we support each other? The market share is big enough for all of us. Yet, over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, companies will be frightened of doing that through their loss of their IP, loss of their market share. But when you truly collaborate, everybody wants to help everybody. You just got to give them the space.
I think when you have a very similar mission, when you understand commerciality and profitability is important, but when you want to solve a big problem, then actually that's when you can collaborate and it's safe to do so, and it feels right because you're not competing on that front. You actually both all want the same thing.
And that brings that incredible phrase alive. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think, that's where we truly are starting to think differently, stimulated a lot by COVID, where we're now starting to say, how do we do this together? How do we truly collaborate? And I think that's a whole new dimension that's going to get incredible traction over the next decade.
Jeff, it's been wonderful to have you on the show today. Thank you very much. Today, we have delved deep into mindset and challenging traditional systems. And sometimes it's not about reinventing the wheel, but doing something bigger and better than it's been done before. So in every episode, we're spotlighting marketing minds behind successful impact-led businesses. And you can head to pitchpurpose.co.uk to find links to all of our socials. Please like and share, and you'll find links to other episodes in this series. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being our guest today.
You're more than welcome. It was really good fun, challenging questions, and I've enjoyed every minute. Thank you.
This has been Pitch Purpose, a marketing podcast with Ian Scott and Emma Healy. See you next time.